His name was Michelangelo Merisi. He was born in Milan in 1571. Later the world would know him by the name of his family's town, Caravaggio. His early life was marked by loss. A shadow fell over him when he was just a young boy. The plague, a terrible and swift disease, swept through the land. It came for his father when he was only 6 years old. The man who was a decorator who filled spaces with color was gone. This deep and early wound would stay with him forever. It shaped the man he would become, and it colored the art he would create. His world became a place of sudden, harsh realities. The losses did not stop there. When he was 13, another tragedy struck. His mother also passed away, leaving him an orphan. He was now truly alone in the world, a teenager without the guidance of his parents. This profound sense of abandonment is something many believe we can see in his later work. When he painted grief, it was not a polite, distant sorrow, it was raw and real, the kind of pain that comes from personal experience. Some look at his painting, The Death of the Virgin, and see the face of a son mourning his own mother, capturing a grief too human for the church to accept. His childhood was not one of peace, but one of survival and sorrow. At 13, with his world turned upside down, he began an apprenticeship. He started to learn the craft of painting with a man named Simone Pietrozano in Milan. This was his formal entry into the world of art. For 4 years he studied the techniques of the masters. He learned about the Lombard school of painting, which valued a certain kind of simplicity and a close attention to natural details. He was also exposed to the works of the great Leonardo da Vinci. This training gave him the tools he would need, the foundation upon which he would build his revolutionary style. But the quiet life of a student was not meant for him. Even in his youth a storm was brewing inside him. His temper was quick, his spirit rebellious. He was not one to follow rules meekly or to turn away from a fight. His apprenticeship ended, but his troubles were just beginning. Before he could truly make a name for himself as an artist in Milan, he found himself on the wrong side of the law. After a fight that left a police officer injured, he had to flee. He left his hometown behind, a fugitive with a paintbrush. He set his sights on a new city, a place of power, wealth and art. He was headed for Rome, unaware that the city would both make his name and seal his fate. If you enjoyed learning about Caravaggio's dramatic beginnings, please like this video and subscribe to our channel for more stories from art history. Caravaggio arrived in Rome around 1592. He was a young man with immense talent but no money and honestly few connections. The city was a dazzling, dangerous place. It was the center of the art world, filled with grand churches and wealthy patrons who wanted to fill them with beautiful things. For a struggling artist, it was a place of great opportunity and great risk. He started at the very bottom, working in workshops, painting fruits and flowers for other, more established painters. He was poor, often hungry, and his difficult personality did not make things any easier. He was known to be arrogant and had a temper that could flare up at any moment. His personality was a constant source of trouble. He was not a man who could be easily managed. He had severe mood swings, and his days were often filled with drinking, gambling, and brawling in the dark streets and taverns of Rome. His contemporaries described him as a man who was impossible to get along with. He was proud and prickly, quick to take offense and even quicker to draw a sword. This rebellious spirit was part of what made him a great artist. He refused to paint things the old way, but it also made him a dangerous man to know. He walked a fine line between genius and self-destruction every single day. His life in Rome is documented not just by his art, but by a long and detailed criminal record. He was constantly in and out of trouble with the authorities. The charges against him paint a picture of a man ruled by impulse and violence. He was arrested for carrying a sword without a license, a privilege reserved for gentlemen. He threw a plate of hot artichokes at a waiter in a tavern because he felt insulted. He attacked an aristocrat, assaulted people on the street, and got into a nasty brawl with a castle guard. He threw stones at a police officer and even beat up a court official. His life was a chaotic mess of creative bursts and violent outbursts. Despite his wild behavior, his talent was undeniable. It began to get him noticed. A key moment came when he painted The Fortune Teller. In this work, a young gypsy woman reads a nobleman's palm while slyly slipping a ring from his finger. This clever scene, full of subtle drama and everyday realism, caught the eye of a very powerful man, Cardinal Francesco Maria del Monte. The cardinal became Caravaggio's first major patron. He took the unruly artist into his own household, giving him a place to live, food to eat, and most importantly, commissions for new paintings. For a short time it seemed like Caravaggio had found stability. For a while, Caravaggio's fame grew under the cardinal's protection. He was creating some of his most important works, and the commissions were pouring in. But his violent nature could not be contained for long. The protection of a powerful patron could only shield him so much. In May of 1606 his life changed forever. During a heated dispute, possibly over a tennis match or a woman, Caravaggio killed a man named Ranuccio Tomasoni. This was not a tavern brawl he could walk away from. This was murder. The Pope himself sentenced Caravaggio to death. The sentence meant that anyone, anywhere, could kill him and claim a reward. He had no choice but to flee Rome. His life became that of a fugitive. He was the most famous painter in Italy, and he was also a condemned man. He first fled south to Naples, which was under Spanish rule and outside the Pope's direct control. He was welcomed there as an artistic superstar. The powerful Colonna family, who had connections to his past, offered him protection. He continued to paint, and his works from this period became even darker and more frantic. The constant fear of being caught or killed haunted him. He could not stay in one place for too long. The shadow of the death sentence followed him everywhere he went. In the summer of 1607, he saw a path to redemption. He traveled to the island of Malta, home to the powerful Knights of St. John. His plan was to join their order. If he could become a knight, he believed he could use their influence to secure a pardon from the Pope. His fame as an artist preceded him, and he was initially welcomed. He painted a magnificent altarpiece for them, the beheading of St. John the Baptist. In recognition of his genius, he was made a knight, but his old demons returned. He got into another violent brawl, this time with a higher-ranking knight. He was arrested and thrown into a high-security prison, but Caravaggio was not one to be caged. In a daring escape, he managed to get out of the prison and fled Malta. The knights, furious and insulted, stripped him of his title in a formal ceremony. He was now an enemy of the powerful order. He fled to Sicily in late 1608, growing more paranoid and unstable with each passing day. He was isolated, quick to anger, and slept fully armed. In 1609 he made his way back to Naples. There his enemies caught up with him. He was ambushed outside a tavern and brutally attacked, his face so badly disfigured that early reports claimed he was dead. He survived, but he was a broken man. What made Caravaggio so revolutionary was not just his life, but the way he saw the world and put it on canvas. He threw out the old rulebook. Before him, religious art was often filled with idealized figures. Saints looked perfect and divine, floating on clouds with serene expressions. Caravaggio rejected all of that. He painted saints and holy figures as real, ordinary people. He used models from the streets of Rome, laborers, prostitutes, and peasants. His saints had dirty feet, tired faces, and wrinkled brows. This made the sacred stories feel immediate and human. It was a powerful new vision, but it also shocked many people who were used to seeing holiness as something perfect and untouchable. His most famous technical innovation was his dramatic use of light and shadow. This technique is called Chiaroscuro, an Italian term that means light-dark. Caravaggio took this idea to a new extreme, creating a style that art historians now call tenebrism. In his paintings, the background is often plunged into near-total darkness. Out of this blackness, the figures emerge, illuminated by a harsh, dramatic light. It's as if a single, powerful spotlight is hitting the scene from the side. This intense contrast did more than just look dramatic. It created a powerful psychological effect. It focused the viewer's attention exactly where he wanted it, on the core emotion or action of the story. The light in his paintings was not just for show, it was a character in itself. Often the source of the light is not visible. It seems to pour in from an unseen window or an unknown celestial source, cutting through the darkness to reveal a moment of divine intervention or human crisis. In the calling of St. Matthew, a beam of light follows Christ's hand as he points at Matthew, the tax collector. The light is what makes the call holy. It is the light of God entering a dark and worldly room. This use of light made the spiritual visible. It turned a simple scene into a moment of profound, life-changing drama. This technique created a sense of tension and immediacy that was completely new. The darkness in his paintings was not just empty space, it was heavy and mysterious. It could represent sin, ignorance, or the unknown. The figures emerging into the light seemed to be caught in a single, frozen moment. The sharp contrast between the bright, illuminated parts of the figures and the deep shadows that concealed other parts added a sense of realism and three-dimensionality. His paintings felt less like flat images and more like moments of real life, captured in all their messy, dramatic, and emotional glory. He was not just painting a picture, he was directing a scene. Caravaggio's approach was, honestly, a radical departure from the art of the High Renaissance. The great masters before him, like Raphael, often chose to depict moments of calm, balance, and harmony. They might show the aftermath of a great event, where everything is resolved and peaceful. For example, a Renaissance painting of David and Goliath would typically show a triumphant David standing calmly with the giant's head at his feet. But Caravaggio was not interested in the calm after the storm. He wanted to paint the storm itself. He chose to capture the most dramatic, violent, and psychologically intense point of the story. He thrust the viewer directly into the action. He painted the moment of conversion, the act of betrayal, the instant of doubt, or the gruesome act of violence as it was happening. This left the outcome feeling uncertain, and created a powerful sense of suspense. In his version of David with the head of Goliath, David is not celebrating. He looks almost sad, holding the severed head, which is actually a gruesome self-portrait of Caravaggio himself. The focus is on the grim reality of the act, not the glory of the victory. This made his paintings feel raw and unsettling. He was not just telling a story, he was making you a witness to it. This focus on the action was deeply connected to his use of realism. By using ordinary people as his models, he grounded these epic religious and mythological stories in the world he knew. His Virgin Mary was not a queen of heaven but a poor woman. His apostles were fishermen with weathered skin and calloused hands. This made the stories relatable to the common person, but it deeply offended some patrons and church officials. They felt he was being disrespectful, making the holy too common, too dirty, too real. They wanted divine beauty, and Caravaggio gave them gritty humanity. This clash between his vision and the expectations of his patrons led to many of his works being rejected. His famous painting, Death of the Virgin, was refused by the monks who had commissioned it for their church. They were scandalized by his depiction of Mary as a real dead woman, with a swollen body and bare feet. Rumors even spread that he had used the corpse of a drowned prostitute as his model. For Caravaggio, he was showing the honest human sorrow of her death. For the church, he had stripped the scene of its holiness. This painting, honestly, perfectly captures the essence of his art. It was just too real for its time. To understand Caravaggio's genius, we must look at his paintings. Each one is a drama in itself. Consider Judith beheading Holofernes. Other artists had painted this story, but they usually showed Judith as a serene hero after the deed was done. Caravaggio shows us the brutal act itself. The Assyrian general Holofernes struggles as Judith, with a look of determination mixed with disgust, saws through his neck. Blood spurts from the wound. An old servant woman stands beside her, ready with a bag for the head. It is graphic, violent, and psychologically complex. We are not just seeing a murder, we are feeling Judith's conflicted emotions as she performs this terrible, necessary act. Another masterpiece is The Calling of St. Matthew, which hangs in a church in Rome. Here, Caravaggio captures a moment of profound spiritual transformation. Jesus, almost hidden in the shadows on the right, points towards Matthew, a tax collector sitting at a table counting money with his associates. A single sharp beam of light slices across the dark room, illuminating Matthew's face. Confused, Matthew points to himself as if to say, "Who? Me?" In that simple gesture, Caravaggio captures the essence of the divine call. It is unexpected, shocking, and demands a response. The hand of Christ deliberately echoes the hand of God in Michelangelo's creation of Adam, suggesting this is a moment of new creation for Matthew's soul. Perhaps his most personal work is the beheading of Saint John the Baptist, painted in Malta. It is his largest painting, and it is the only one he ever signed. The scene is stark and brutal. John the Baptist is already on the ground, and the executioner is pulling out a knife to finish the job as a servant girl holds a golden platter for his head. In the blood spilling from John's neck, Caravaggio signed his name, F. Michelangelo, for Fra or Brother Michelangelo. He signed his name in the victim's blood. This is widely seen as a confession. He, the sinner, identifies with the martyr, a desperate plea for forgiveness from a man on the run. Late in his life, after he had been attacked and disfigured, he painted David with the head of Goliath. This is a haunting work of self-reflection. The severed head of the giant Goliath is a self-portrait of Caravaggio himself, older, corrupted, and defeated. The young, triumphant David who holds the head is also thought to be a self-portrait of a younger, more innocent Caravaggio. The look on David's face is not one of victory, but of pity and sadness. It is as if Caravaggio is judging himself. with his own innocent youth slaying his sinful, older self. It is a painted confession, a final, desperate act of penance for a life of violence. Caravaggio did not emerge from a vacuum. He was part of a major shift in art and culture known as the Baroque era. This period began in the late 16th century, largely as a response by the Catholic Church to the Protestant Reformation. The Reformation had challenged the Church's authority, and in response the Church sought ways to reaffirm its power and inspire faith in the common people. At the Council of Trent, which concluded in 1563, the Church called for a new kind of religious art. They wanted art that was direct, emotionally powerful, and could stir the souls of the faithful. The art of the High Renaissance, with its perfect balance, ideal beauty, and intellectual harmony, was seen as too distant and cold for this new purpose. The Baroque style that followed was all about drama, emotion, movement, and energy. It was designed to overwhelm the senses and appeal directly to the heart, not just the mind. Artists began to use deep colors, rich textures, and intense contrasts of light and dark to create works that felt alive and exciting. The goal was to make the viewer feel the passion of a martyr, the awe of a miracle, or the terror of damnation. It was an art of experience. Caravaggio, born just a few years after the Council of Trent ended, became the perfect painter for this new era. While he may not have been a devout man in his personal life, his art perfectly captured the spirit of the Baroque. His intense realism, his dramatic use of light, and his focus on the most emotional moment of a story were exactly what the Church was looking for, even if his methods sometimes went too far for their tastes. He made the stories of the Bible feel real and present. When you looked at one of his paintings, you were not just an observer, you were a participant in the drama. He is rightly considered the father of Baroque painting. His style was so powerful and new that it spread like wildfire across Europe. Artists who followed his style came to be known as the Caravaggisti. Painters from Spain, France, and the Netherlands traveled to Rome to see his work and learn from his techniques. Artists like Artemisia Gentileschi, Georges de la Tour, and even the great Rembrandt were all deeply influenced by his use of tenebrism and his psychological realism. He had shown them a new way to paint, a way that was more honest, more powerful, and more deeply human. In the summer of 1610, a glimmer of hope appeared for the fugitive artist. After years of running, hiding, and painting his way through southern Italy, word reached him that a papal pardon was close. His powerful friends in Rome, including the Cardinal Scipione Borghese, had been working on his behalf. Borghese was a major art collector and desperately wanted Caravaggio's latest works. The pardon seemed to be conditioned on Caravaggio giving these paintings to the cardinal. Believing his exile was finally over, Caravaggio gathered his last few canvases and boarded a ship heading north towards Rome. He was finally going home, but he would never arrive. What happened next is a story shrouded in mystery and confusion. The ship made a stop at a small port called Palo. Here, for reasons that are still unclear, Caravaggio was arrested and thrown in jail. It may have been a case of mistaken identity or a final act of revenge from one of his many enemies. He was released after 2 days, but by then, the ship carrying him, his pardon, and his precious paintings had already sailed away without him. He was left stranded on the coast, frantic and alone. Desperate to reclaim his paintings and reach Rome, he began a frantic journey up the coast under the burning July sun. He was sick, exhausted, and likely suffering from a raging fever. He trudged for miles along the marshy, malaria-infested coastline searching for the ship. He eventually collapsed in the small town of Porto Ercole. He was taken to a local hospital, but it was too late. Alone and far from home, Michelangelo Merisi da Caravaggio died. He was only 38 years old. The pardon from the Pope reportedly arrived in Naples just a few days later. For centuries, the exact cause of his death was debated. Some said it was the fever he contracted on the coast, possibly malaria or brucellosis. Others whispered that he had finally been murdered, perhaps by the Knights of Malta seeking revenge for his escape and insults. Another theory suggested he died from lead poisoning, a common affliction for painters of his time who mixed their own paints and were known to be careless. In 2010, scientists studying what are believed to be his remains found evidence that he may have died from an infection in a wound, possibly one from his last brawl in Naples, which was complicated by sunstroke and disease. His violent life had finally caught up with him. After his dramatic death, Caravaggio's fame quickly faded. New artistic styles came into fashion, and for centuries he was largely forgotten, dismissed as a strange and violent figure whose art was too dark and vulgar, but his influence never truly disappeared. It lived on in the work of the artist who had been mesmerized by his style. The Caravaggisti kept his flame alive, carrying his dramatic use of light and his unflinching realism across the continent. Great masters like Rembrandt and Velázquez built upon his foundations, ensuring that his revolutionary ideas would become a permanent part of the language of painting. It was not until the 20th century that the world truly rediscovered Caravaggio. Art historians began to look back at his work with fresh eyes, recognizing him not as a curious footnote, but as a pivotal figure who single-handedly changed the course of art. They saw him as the first truly modern painter, an artist who broke from the past and painted with a raw, psychological intensity that still felt fresh and powerful hundreds of years later. His life story, full of passion, violence, and tragedy, only added to his mystique. The rebel artist became a hero for a modern age that valued authenticity and raw emotion. His influence extends far beyond the walls of art galleries. It can be seen in the very fabric of our visual culture, especially in film. Directors and cinematographers have long been inspired by his work. His use of tenebrism is essentially a form of cinematic lighting. The harsh spotlight, the deep shadows, the focus on a dramatic moment. These are the tools of filmmaking. Directors like Martin Scorsese have openly spoken about their debt to Caravaggio. When you see a character in a film emerge from the darkness into a single sharp beam of light, you are seeing the legacy of a 17th century painter who thought like a director. Caravaggio's dark legacy is therefore a dual one. It is the legacy of a troubled man whose life was a chaotic spiral of genius and violence. But it is also the enduring legacy of an artist who taught us to see the world differently. He showed us that there is beauty in imperfection, that there is divinity in the dirt and grime of everyday life, and that the most profound truths are often found not in perfect serenity, but in the heart of the storm. He painted with darkness, but what he revealed was something essential about the human condition. His light, cutting through the shadows, continues to illuminate our world. If you enjoyed this journey into Caravaggio's world, please like this video, and subscribe to our channel for more stories from the world of art.